Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday. I'm gonna jump into some questions. First one from Rico Suave. Go ahead, you. I know you want to.
Rico Suave.
Of course you did. Hello, can you talk about wearing ceramic watches? I actually like that song from back in the day. And anybody that remembers that song and tells me they didn't like it when it first came out, you're lying. Everybody loved that song. Hello, can you talk about wearing ceramic watches like Hublot Blackmagic? How careful do you have to be with cracking the case if you smash it against a door or wall? Short answer, you don't have to be very careful. Now let me give you the long answer because I'm not about short answers, right? I've had ceramic watches, I've worn ceramic watches, I still wear ceramic watches, Hublots and APs. I'll use those as an example because those are the ones that I pretty much wore. Ceramic in itself is a very durable material. Before I get into the bezels, because this is what you're referring to, I'm gonna talk about a watch my wife owned. Remember the whole craze when the Chanel J12s came out, the all ceramic watches, right? The case, the bezel, the bracelet. I'm not gonna generalize all women, but I'll talk about my wife. She beats the crap out of her watch. The one watch she's never managed to beat up was the Chanel J12. When I took the watch back from her, the only thing I really did is I washed it. Literally washed it with soap and water and it looked brand new. The only way you could tell the watch was pre-owned is because due to the flaw, I should say, the design of the bracelet loosens up. You ever see those old Rolexes that are kind of like a rainbow? The same thing happens to those Chanel watches, but a lot faster. The bracelet starts to rattle, it gets loose. But again, that's irrelevant. I'm not the guy to take an AP with a ceramic bezel and scratch it against the payment and see if there'll be scratches, but according to the manufacturer, it's supposed to be very scratch resistant or even scratch proof. Have I banged my watches? I'm also one of those people that bangs their watches around. I walk into door handles, I walk into walls. I drop my watches off my wrist onto the pavement, and I've done that a couple of times with ceramic bezel watches. Picked them back up, sort of did one of these things, wiped up the little smudges, and the ceramic bezel was perfect. Now, this is the part where I said, don't try this at home. Don't go throwing your watches against the wall. It's not good. Or don't go dropping your watches. It's usually not good for them in general, right? But in my experience, a ceramic bezel has withstood the test of pretty rough wear. So you don't have to worry about it. I'll give you a quick story. I have ran into a cracked ceramic bezel on a watch. It was a Baricello in titanium. I took a watch in trade from a client. It took about a $2,500 hit because the bezel was cracked. And when I gave the watch to my watchmaker to service and so on and so forth, to order the new bezel, I asked my watchmaker, I said, how did that happen? Ceramic is pretty durable. Did he drop the watch so hard? Did he drop a dumbbell on it or something? Like, what happened? And my watchmaker said, very simple. He's like, no, somebody else has opened this watch before, and they over-tightened the screws. And by over-tightening the screws, what happens is it sets tremendous pressure on the part itself, and that's where it cracked. And oddly enough, the crack was right where the screw was, right? Now remember, the screws on top of the bezels of APs are not the actual screws. The screws are actually from the inside, but it's irrelevant. So yes, if you drop the dumbbell on one of them, the pressure from dropping a heavy dumbbell onto a watch will crack that bezel. I also think that by dropping it hard enough, by that, you'd probably have to slam it against the ground. That would probably create enough pressure for the bezel to crack as well, most likely at the part where it's screwed on or where it's thinnest, where the screw goes in, because there's a hole inside there, right? Other than that, I don't think you should wear your regular wear and tear, your daily wear, and bumping into things is not going to crack that bezel. Hope that answers your question. Next question is from Ches Liu. Hi Roman, great videos as usual, thank you. You often mention the 2008 crisis. We know that there is an economy downturn and it's definitely affected the watch buyer seller, but can you give us more insights on what really happened till it hit the market so hard? Thanks. I do talk about the crisis. I refer back to it quite often because that was a major shift in the watch market, correction, downfall, however you want to call it. And there's really not much more I can say other than what I have said already, but I will tell you exactly what happened the day it happened. When everything went down, everything just paused. Imagine a hamster in a wheel and running full speed, as fast as it can possibly run. That was the watch industry right prior to 2008 crisis, to include new brands that were popping up, to include crazy retail prices for the time, which if you compare them to today, maybe not that crazy, to include seemingly unknown brands popping out of everywhere, to include the gray market world being super hot and having the ability to make irregular profits because there weren't that many of us back then, right? Right now you can buy Rolexes on Walmart.com. You got Rulalas and Gilts and all these flash sites. You didn't have all that back then, right? So this hamster wheel was spinning as fast as it possibly could, and the hamster was going full speed faster than it has ever gone before. And all of a sudden somebody took a stick and stuck it in that wheel and it was abrupt stop. What happened? If you do this to a hamster today, my daughter actually owns a hamster. If I did it to my hamster, whose name is Gelato, by the way, shout out to Gelato, the hamster would flip over 50 times before it actually could come to a full stop and be very confused and dazed and hurt, right? And that's exactly what happened. You didn't know what's going on. You didn't know what to do. You didn't know whether to panic, whether to look for a different business, and so on and so forth. And it was more hurtful to the watch businesses because the watch business, I would refer to as the luxury goods sector. These watches are expensive toys, I told you guys before. What is the first thing that you will not do when there's financial issues? When you see people getting laid off, when you see your business slow down in its revenue, the last thing you're going to think about is buying an expensive item. I personally think it was the gray market that was a huge help in helping the industry sort of start that hamster wheel slowly. And it did start very, very slow. I wish I was in a position I was in today financially back then to be able to buy up some of the deals that were out in the market over the next 6 months to a year because it was tremendous. And I guess the best example I could bring forth is, let's pick a multi-millionaire, right? Let's pick somebody that's super rich, somebody, let's say, is worth $500 million, right? It's not like you were sitting on $500 million in cash in a bank, right? It was diversified investment, stock market, hedge funds, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, your net worth went from $500 million to, let's say, $350 million. Boo-hoo, right? I feel so bad for you. Now only have $350 million. But think about the mindset of that particular individual. This is the guy that last year was probably at Christie's or Phillips auctions bidding up some of the rarest Rolexes, or just bought a new yacht. And all of a sudden, are you in the mood to go out there and spend tremendous amounts of money? Or are you concerned what's going to happen a year from now or 6 months from now? How quickly is the economy going to rebound? How quickly is your source of income going to go back to where it was, feeding that $500 million net worth that you currently have? You stop. And that's why the hamster wheel stopped abruptly. And that's why it was very, very scary for me at the time, because I was still relatively new in the business. And I really didn't know if I was going to be in the business a year from now, but I kept chugging at it. I was lucky enough to foresee some of the hype that's actually going on today and not have the hyper pieces in stock, or a lot of them at least, so that if they did pop, if the bubble did burst, I wouldn't take a humongous hit. And I also didn't have a lot of stock at the time in general versus comparison to today, right? So I was lucky in that sense. I knew guys that had a whole lot of stock at the time, and they were all the hype pieces. Nautiluses at the time, a lot of Pateks were really hyped up. And they took a big hit, and some of them actually went out of business because they couldn't pay their bills because the stuff wasn't selling. And the bigger you are, the harder they fall. I mean, in my business today, if you drop my sales by 50 to 60 to 70% overnight tomorrow, I will not last that long because, again, I do carry a huge inventory. I do employ a lot of people. I have monthly expenses that are through the roof. Yeah, granted, I may not take my pay, or I may not take my owner's draw, my profits for the month, but again, that can only last so long. And you stick that into any business formula, you can imagine how devastating that was back in 2008. Hope that answers your question somewhat. Next question from Jean. Jean, I apologize if I got your name wrong. Hi, Raman, and he put that in Russian. I've been watching your channel for some time, and I like your no BS approach on a lot of the hot topics. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what is your take on Swatch watches? They were hot in the 90s, and I personally love them. It seems they vanished in the past years, and a lot of folks dislike them. I think they have chronological value as well. Some of the automatics were pretty cool, namely the Diafine lineup. Keep up the good work. Regards from Serbia, right? I'm guessing you're from Serbia. I can't really read that. It's like Russian, but not Russian, so I'm not sure what that last word is. In either case, Jean, I like Swatch watches. I actually talked about Swatch watches recently, and I referred to a video that a gentleman by the name of CQ that works for Watchbox did on how the Swatch watch saved the Swiss industry as we know it today. The Swatch watch and the Swatch group played a tremendous role in the watch business. If it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be in the business today, because they literally saved the watch industry during the quartz crisis, or the quartz wars as they called it. right? Do I dislike the watches? I told you guys before, I like every watch. And I guarantee you, if you show me a lineup of 1,000 different Swatch watches, I'm going to pick at least 10 that I absolutely love. My son has a Swatch watch that I bought him actually just recently. I was in Aruba. They actually have a little boutique in one of the malls. It's a Swatch watch boutique, and they have hundreds of different Swatch watches. I actually bought him one. You still see them in every major mall. So contrary to all belief, they are still popular. They are still selling. They're affordable, well-made Swiss quartz watches for the most part, and they're cool. For the lack of a better word, there's just a breath of fresh air. They're very, very cool. You probably won't see a lot of older folks wearing them. To me, it's more of like a young watch nowadays, where before it wasn't. But it's still a hip, cool watch, and I think it's here to stay for a long, long time, and it's really not going to vanish. As you said, they haven't really vanished. They're still around, and they're still selling pretty strong. They may not be as much as in your face. There's not a whole lot of YouTube videos on Swatch watches. Maybe I should make one. I'm sure I have a couple laying around somewhere. If you happen to like the Diafine lineup, go out there, find yourself one. I'm sure it's not gonna break the bank at all. Wear it and enjoy it. Next question from Ryan Lintz. Hey Roman, just watched a YouTube video you did with Bob on vintage timepieces. Very interesting and educational video. Ian, if you could just link that up there. One thing that Bob said, that video that really stuck with me, with manufactured collectibles watches that are being produced today. They're just really throwbacks to the real vintage jams. I'm currently second on my ID's list to get a ceramic Daytona. While I really like the Panda ceramic Daytona, it doesn't necessarily sing to me like vintage Rolex pieces. Honestly, it has crossed my mind to flip the ceramic Daytona for a vintage Rolex. I'm not a flipper or some big watch collector. I only have one watch, and that's the Rolex GMT 16710. If you were me, would you keep the ceramic Daytona, wear it, live in it for the next 20 years and feel comfortable that you made a solid purchase? Or would you flip the Daytona for a vintage Rolex to scratch the vintage itch and potentially have a better investment? I know Daytonas in general are pretty darn good investments. If so, what would you recommend I should be looking at in the mid to low 20K range? Thanks for any insight. Cheers, Ryan. You've answered a lot of your questions on your own there. You know, do I keep the Daytona and feel that I made a comfortable, solid purchase, and i.e. a good investment? Or do I scratch the Rolex, the vintage itch? Well, which is it that you like? If you're not that crazy about the Daytonas, by all means, flip it. And the fact that you said I'm not a flipper or a big watch collector, you know, a flipper is not necessarily a negative thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you getting the Daytona, taking a profit, and putting it into the next watch if that's not what you want. And if you're looking to scratch the vintage itch, then by all means, that's what you go with. I told you guys, buy what you like first and foremost. Then the question becomes which vintage timepiece you want. You obviously start on getting a vintage Rolex, then by all means, I would tell you go for an older Daytona. Go for a Zenith Movement stainless steel Daytona. Or go for a Zenith Movement gold, yellow gold Daytona, like the one I was wearing in the last episode, right? Something of that nature, if this is what you're looking to do. If you really want to go back even further, look at some of the older Pepsi GMTs. Pay a little more, get one with box and papers. If your biggest concern is the investment value behind it 20 years from now, then obviously you will most likely do better with a vintage Pepsi GMT, let's say today, that's complete with box and paper. With a watch that's 40 or 50 years older, seemingly you would say, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? But at the same token, you said it, Daytona is probably the #1 selling watch of all time, so nobody really knows. What you also don't know is how many of those ceramic Daytonas are going to be made and for how long. If they make them for the next 20 years, imagine the amount of ceramic Daytonas that are going to be out there. Who knows when the next time they're going to change up the design of the Daytona. Or maybe they'll come out with a brand spanking new one a year from now, discontinue these, and they're going to go through the roof just the same. There's no glass ball. So what it comes down to is, again, what I always say, buy what you like first and foremost. It sounds to me like you definitely have a vintage itch. Decide which model is really itching you best. That makes sense? And go for that. I agree with going older, but again, I'm somewhat biased. I happen to like vintage Rolexes, right? So as far as recommendation in mid-20s, again, a Zenith Daytona in steel, a Zenith Daytona in gold, definitely some of the older GMTs. I also am a big fan of the red subs, you know, and again, spend a little more and get ones with box and papers today. You're gonna pay top dollar today, but 20 years from now, it's definitely a solid investment. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to take a question from Fennel Park. I believe I answered your question before, Fennel. Roman, could you shed some light on Rolex price increases? Do they increase their prices after specific intervals? Do they increase their price based on the world economy? And what about prices of the gold watches? Recently, gold prices have shot up a lot. Does that mean Rolex will soon do a price increase? Thank you. Really enjoy your videos. A big thumbs up for Ian. Thank you for that, Neil, and I'm sure Ian appreciates it. I actually tell Ian, and Ian reads all these comments as well. And every time you guys mention his name, it does make him feel good. So keep the comments coming. A lot of the creativity behind these videos and the editing is due to Ian. It is a collective effort. You know, we do review all the videos together, but it's his creative side often that makes all those funny things and doesn't make these videos as boring as just me talking, right? So I'm not going to talk about the Rolex price increase. I'm going to talk price increases in general. As a rule of thumb, every manufacturer increases prices yearly, right? And that increase can be anywhere from 3% to sometimes even as high as 12%. There are seldom times when there's turmoil in the currencies market, meaning some economies are not doing as well as others, where they'll do interim price increases just to sort of even out the playing field. I talked about this before in Europe when the euro was jumping from 160 to 130, then back to 135 and back to 115. That's when manufacturers at some point actually did it twice or three times. They either decreased or increased the prices to level the playing field because of what was happening. As the euro went down in price, all of a sudden the dollar was so strong, you can buy watches at retail in Europe and sell it at a discount in America and make money, right? So they obviously adjusted for that. They try to go off of the Swiss franc for the most time, which is pretty even key, but even still, when major currencies are volatile, like the euro or like the dollar, for example, that's when you'll often find a price increase. They try not to decrease prices ever. In fact, in my career, I don't remember a price decrease ever. What happens is they'll increase the retail prices in the market where the currency is volatile. Again, just to level the playing field. As far as the price of gold, there's no watch out there. I don't care if you're talking about the brick from AP, there's no watch out there that's worth its price in gold when it comes to retail pricing. Do manufacturers sometimes use gold increased prices to justify price increases? Yes, but only in rare cases. You remember when gold went up to what, 2,500 almost, right? Yes, some manufacturers increase their prices due to the gold price increase, but in reality, they're just jumping on the bandwagon of that because I don't care what watch you have, take that watch, put it on the scale, figure out how much gold is there. It's 18 karat gold, right? And you will quickly find out that there's just not enough gold for the retail price that the watch is set at, or even, again, the gray market price. As far as Rolex having a price increase, again, expect a price increase from manufacturers pretty much year in and year out, unless there's something crazy going on in the market. But not necessarily across all models, too, because there's certain models that they didn't want to price themselves out of a market. Notice the stainless steel Rolexes are still retailed under $10,000 for most of them, right? Granted, there's a crazy shortage right now. They're trading at twice this list value, but if you look at the list prices, they're still reasonable. It would be unreasonable for a Rolex Pepsi or for a Rolex Samara to retail at $26,000. So we'll never actually get there unless we're talking about 20 years from now, taking into consideration inflation and all those things. But again, in a short amount of time, you're never going to see a crazy price increase. And at some point, some years, they'll skip certain models because it just doesn't make sense. Because if they continue raising prices year in, year out in every single model, your lower end models or your cheaper models, as I would say, they would price themselves out of a market because there'll be consumers out there that will say something like, well, I don't really think that the retail price of a stainless steel sub with no date is reasonable at $20,000. I hope you see where I'm going with this, and I hope that answers your question. There was a question in here from Top Wound Up. Can you do an AP 15400 versus 15300 versus 15500 versus 15202 versus 5402? As much as I would love to do that, and I would do that on What's on My Desk episodes, having 1, 2, 3, well, I have the 5402. I actually have a 15202 here in rose gold. I don't have a 15500. I sold one last week, though, and I don't have the other two at the moment. But whenever I gather all those together in one room, I will do my best to do that comparison. So, sorry I couldn't answer that right now. Here's a cool question from Mr. Inzio. Did you hear the story of a man getting his Richard Mille stolen in Spain? Yes, it was all over the news. It was all over social media. Ian, if you please. But the question is, what is the best way to protect yourself and watch while out in public? Insurance. If you're going to buy an expensive item, what's the point of having an expensive item if you can't use it, right? It's like buying a Ferrari and never driving and afraid of getting carjacked, right? So insurance is probably going to be your number one protection. But there are many ways to take precautions. Know where you're going first and foremost. Know what you're going to be doing while you're there. If I'm out in Mykonos and I'm partying my ass off, day drinking at a club, or I'm in Vegas and so on and so forth, there's no reason for me to put on a $1 million watch. There's no reason for me to put on a very expensive watch, period, because I'm probably going to be drunk out of my mind, not knowing what I'm doing, and I may just lose the watch, or somebody can take it off my wrist and I won't even notice it, right? Know the areas that you're going to. If you're traveling in countries or areas of countries that are notoriously not safe or notoriously for stuff getting stolen, then by all means don't wear your watch. But if you insist on wearing your watch, as long as you have insurance, then you really don't have anything to worry about. I'll tell you a quick story. The guy comes up to my booth at a Hong Kong show. He brought me I think it was an RM10. It was some limited RM10 PVD edition. I don't remember what it was. I'm looking at the watch, and where the rubber strap is, one of the rubber straps is cut in half, literally right down the middle, more or less. And somebody literally took a thread to it and like sewed it back together. This guy comes up to my booth and says, "Hey, I'd like to sell this watch." I didn't know the guy as far as I could throw them. And by looking at that, it literally looks like somebody ripped that off someone's wrist. I respectfully declined and said, "Thank you, this is not for me." And then a dealer friend of mine from Moscow told me, "You know why that's the way it is?" I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "This is what they do in Europe now, right? In a lot of these hot places like Saint-Tropez or Cannes or Mykonos, or a lot of these party places where rich people go to party and wear these expensive things. It's a two-guy team. You have a guy that walks by you, and what he has is a metal hook on the inside of their palm. They walk by you and they go like this. By doing that, that hook hooks your strap. It really cuts the strap in half. As that happens, a guy usually on a scooter or a motorcycle pulls up, the watch is grabbed, and they take off with your watch. This is a true story. This is being done right now in Europe and some other places in the world. And that's why the watch that was brought to my booth literally was cut right down the middle right here. How do you prevent that? Well, if I'm wearing an AP, there's no way anybody's cutting through that. You can't yank this watch off my wrist because the buckle is really tight. The only way to take this off is you really have to just press this little thing, and only then it pops off. So the only way this could be taken off my wrist is if, let's say, I passed out drunk somewhere on a couch at a pool party, which I actually never do. I never lose control. I do like to drink. You guys seen plenty of my videos, but you will never see me out of control, falling over drunk, because I know my limits and I stay within those limits. So again, the best way to protect yourself, first and foremost, get insurance. Don't worry about anything. Your watch gets stolen, it's covered. It is what it is. But for the most part, be aware of where you are, be aware of where you're going, be aware of your surroundings, and wear appropriate watches to appropriate places. That's the best advice I can give you. Hope that answers your question. I hope you liked the little side story. I'll take one more. This is a really good one from Shia, whose questions I think I've answered before in the past as well. What's up, Shia? Roman, great videos as always. Thank you. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on limited editions in the area of F1 and other sports. The Schumacher is probably the most popular F1 related watch with respect to RM Felipe Massa editions, but it seems like none of the new guys have anything with their signature on it. I know a lot of people don't watch F1 in the States, but Hamilton is probably the face of the sport globally, and it has a lot of value to add to the brand. With other sports and athletes as well, I think LeBron AP was the last athlete edition I can think of. I know Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and many others are ambassadors for the brands, but have we hit the end of athlete editions? A company's just not taking that risk anymore. Thanks as always, and congrats on the 10K. Thanks again, Shia. Yeah, a lot of good answers in your question. Yes, Schumacher undoubtedly is probably the most popular F1 related watch from Audemars Piguet. It's still a limited edition that's selling way over list, and it's hard to come by. Felipe Massa was sort of like, he was like neither here or there. It was during the time where every RM11 was a Felipe Massa edition, right? So it kind of got lost in translation as far as I feel. Although due to the hype of the brand right now and how hot it is, obviously seemingly it's hot, but it's not really hot due to Felipe Massa, if you ask me. Sports watches, sports stars. You're right again. LeBron is the last and the most successful sports watch out there. It's still trading way over list. It's still very hard to come by. My business partner Arthur owns one. He will never sell that watch. He absolutely loves the watch. Shaquille O'Neal, popular right out of the gate, not so popular afterward, not so popular today. A watch you can pick up under $20,000 that used to trade at $35,000 to $40,000. And it's still hard to sell, mainly due to the fact that it's very bulky. As far as other ambassadors, yeah, there are plenty of sports ambassadors out there that are with the brand, and I think that's a better way to go for the brands. Now, don't think for a second you're not going to see more editions that are related to F1 or that are related to sports. But you're limiting yourself when you make a limited edition for a particular individual. Let's take a Jay-Z watch, right? A total of 60, 70 watches. You're limiting yourself, because if you're trying to create a limited edition, it has to be a limited edition, right? Although I told you guys I want the new Omega Moon watch, they made 6,969 of them. That's a lot of watches, sort of loses that limited appeal, right? So for it to be appealing at the same time and utilizing the same person, that person costs money, right? They pay that person to make that watch, right? They pay the person to be associated with a brand. You know, this is what stars and the likes of athletes of F1 racers do. They make money on the side via endorsements. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, I'm all for that. So when you make a limited edition like the LeBron watch, let's say it costs you XYZ money to make that limited edition for LeBron, right? To pay LeBron himself. Then you have to make an X amount of watches in order to turn a profit, right? Because that's part of your cost. It's not just manufacturing anymore, right? Because again, the manufacturers don't make money when these things sell and then go over list. They sell them at list, right? maybe through their boutique so that they don't have to pay an authorized dealer per se. You're done. And that person is really not an ambassador for you anymore. He is associated with the brand. Everybody knows the AP LeBron, or everybody knows the Schumacher LeBron, right? But that person is not, for say, like an ambassador. You don't see him in advertisements and so on and so forth, maybe here and there. When you simply take on an ambassador and you create a contract with him where the guy does photo shoots, where the guy wears your watches, where the guy talks about your watches, where the guy's out and about for a prolonged amount of time, then you get more light shed onto your brand. It's more of a brand recognition thing than anything else. I think the advertising and the market value there is greater than that of creating a single limited edition. When you create that single limited edition, and it's a hot limited edition and everybody wants it, that does well for the brand. But I feel like that's more short term than getting an ambassador and having them stay on for a while, like Rafael Nadal, for example, for Richard Mille today. I think that has a lot more value behind it than actually taking one limited edition and making it for someone. The last thing you asked is the company's not taking, it's not a risk. I think that, there were plenty of limited editions that were flops, but usually they were not limited editions for humans or for individuals like Schumacher or Montoya or LeBron. A lot of the flops were some of the boutique editions, whether it's a Geneva boutique or a New York boutique or something like that. Some of the other things were flops. And the reason they were flops is because people care a lot more about LeBron James or Roger Federer than they do about a particular boutique location or particular authorized dealer that had a limited edition made for them, unless they're against somebody extremely famous, right? The AP Ginza, the AP Saint Honoré, the AP Geneva boutique editions, Wempe editions, all those things, you don't see them being traded through the roof right now because nobody really cares. Movie watches do better. Arnold Schwarzenegger watches did a lot better because Arnold Schwarzenegger is still a human being. People can relate to a star, whether it's a movie star, a sports star, or a racing star. It doesn't really matter. People always relate to them. They, I guess, call them, want to be like them, you know, be in their image, right? We all follow celebrities. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry on its own, especially in the United States. But, it's tough to relate yourself to, I've been to Saint Honoré boutique, right? I've been to the Monte Napoleone boutique in Italy, right, for AP. I went there once, I said, I've been there, I've seen it, but to have that watch doesn't do much for an individual as much as a watch that's made for a star would do. Hope that answers your question. Well, guys, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as usual. Hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber to my channel. Share it with your friends that you may think will enjoy this content. Oh, what am I wearing? I'm wearing the old 39mm Royal Oak stainless steel with the blue dial. Always forget to do that. Other than that, guys, I'll see you next Tuesday.